Before I begin, if you love true-life emotional confessions, stories that test the limits of love, loyalty, and desire, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more breathtaking stories that will pull you into the heart of every emotion. The first thing you should know is that betrayal never begins in bed. It begins quietly, in the spaces between words, in the tired smiles over breakfast, in the unspoken loneliness that no one notices, not even you. I was 35, a wife, a mother of two, and by every social standard, blessed. We lived on the north side of Chicago, in a neat, brick home with trimmed hedges and a white porch swing Daniel built the summer after our wedding. Our photos hung perfectly on the walls, two smiling kids, a golden retriever, and a husband who worked too hard but meant well. Daniel was the kind of man everyone respected, consistent, reliable, calm. But calm can turn into distant, and reliability can become routine. And somewhere between his late nights at the firm and my endless school runs, we stopped looking at each other the way we used to. I told myself it was just marriage getting older. Everyone said love settles with time. But what no one tells you is, sometimes it doesn't settle. It fades. It was late spring when I first met Ethan Miller. He was the architect supervising the renovation of our backyard patio. 29, tall, with a voice that carried a quiet confidence, the kind that makes you listen even when he says something ordinary. The morning he walked into my kitchen, I was still in my robe, holding a cup of coffee, my hair messy, my mind cluttered with grocery lists and PTA emails. He smiled, easy and polite. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, offering a hand. "Claire," I corrected, shaking it. His grip was firm, warm. I didn't think much of it, not then. He spent the week taking measurements and sketching blueprints on our dining table. I'd bring him iced tea, ask about progress, and somehow, small talk stretched into real talk, books, cities we'd both visited, dreams we never pursued. It wasn't flirtation, at least, that's what I told myself. It was connection. And connection, after years of emotional drought, felt dangerously close to oxygen. Daniel noticed my good mood that week. "You've been smiling a lot lately," he said one evening. I laughed it off, maybe because the house is finally coming together. He nodded, distracted by his phone, and that was the end of it. But something inside me twisted, guilt. Because deep down, I knew the house wasn't the reason. By the third week, Ethan's presence had become a rhythm. The sound of his boots on the porch, the smell of sawdust mixed with cedar and cologne, the easy laughter that slipped into my afternoons. There was an unspoken energy between us, not physical yet, but alive, undeniable. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled outside, he lingered by the door before leaving. "You ever miss the person you used to be?" he asked suddenly. The question hit me harder than I expected. "Every day," I whispered. He smiled faintly, eyes studying mine like he could see every secret I'd buried beneath my perfect life. That was the moment the first real crack appeared, not in my marriage, but inside me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel lay beside me, breathing slow and steady, while my mind replayed that moment at the door, Ethan's voice, his eyes, his question. I tried to silence it, telling myself it was harmless. Just a passing thought. But desire doesn't always shout, sometimes, it whispers until you start listening. Over the next few days, I found myself anticipating his visits. I dressed better, wore perfume even when I didn't plan to leave the house. I told myself it was self-care, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Ethan noticed. Of course, he did. One afternoon, as we stood by the unfinished patio, he said softly, "You look different lately. Happier." I laughed nervously. Renovations can do that. He smiled knowingly. Sure. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. That weekend, Daniel had to travel for a conference in Seattle. The kids were at my parents'. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Ethan texted that he needed to pick up some blueprints he'd left behind. I hesitated before replying, then typed, "Sure, I'll be home." When he arrived, the air felt different, charged. He stepped in, raindrops clinging to his jacket. "Didn't expect the storm," he said, shaking his hair slightly. I handed him the folder, our fingers brushing. For a second, neither of us moved. The thunder outside cracked like warning bells. I could have stepped back. I could have ended it right there. But I didn't. Instead, I met his eyes, and in that moment, everything I thought I understood about love, loyalty, and self-control began to crumble. He didn't touch me. Not yet. But he didn't have to. The space between us was already burning. When he finally left, the storm had stopped. I stood at the window, watching the last droplets trace down the glass, and realized something terrifying: I didn't want to stop it. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Desired. Alive. And that, more than anything, frightened me. Because I knew desire was a flame that could burn down everything I'd built. And still, part of me wanted to strike the match. I tried to convince myself that nothing had happened. That night after Ethan left, I sat in the quiet living room with the faint smell of his cologne still in the air, and I told myself it was just tension. Human curiosity. A harmless what-if. But denial is only a fragile bandage. Underneath, desire was bleeding. The next morning, Chicago woke beneath soft gray clouds. Daniel's flight landed early, and when he walked in, smiling and exhausted, guilt hit me so hard it almost felt physical. I hugged him tighter than I had in months. I even cooked his favorite breakfast, cinnamon pancakes and strong coffee, as though I could drown the guilt in sweetness. But when he kissed my forehead and said, "You're amazing, Claire," I felt my throat tighten. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, Ethan's voice whispered, "You ever miss the person you used to be?" And I did. Ethan returned on Monday, focused, professional, pretending nothing was different. I did the same. But beneath every word, something unspoken throbbed like a heartbeat. He'd call out measurements, I'd jot them down, pretending my hands weren't shaking. When he bent over the plans, his shoulder brushed mine, accidental, innocent, but it sent an ache through me that was anything but. By the second week of June, Chicago's summer heat arrived. The air was heavy, thick with humidity and temptation. One afternoon, while Daniel was at the office, Ethan came by to check the new patio lights. He was in a white t-shirt, faint smudge of dust across his arm. I offered him lemonade, he took it, and our fingers touched again. That single touch, warm, electric, unraveled every wall I'd built. He looked at me, not smiling this time. His eyes were dark, steady, asking without words. And for a long, dangerous second, I couldn't look away. Finally, I whispered, "We shouldn't." "I know," he said softly. "But I can't stop thinking about you." The world tilted. The hum of cicadas outside seemed distant. The room felt too small, the air too thin. "Ethan, please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was begging him to stop or to continue. He stepped back, jaw tight, fighting himself. "I'll finish up outside," he said. His voice was rough, careful. When he left, I pressed my hands to the counter, breathing hard, every nerve alive. That was the day I realized this wasn't just attraction. It was obsession disguised as longing. For days, we didn't speak beyond work details. I thought the distance would cool things down. It didn't. It only sharpened everything. Then one Friday evening, Daniel called to say he'd be late, another client dinner downtown. I hung up, staring at my reflection in the kitchen window. Behind me, the house looked like a museum, perfect, still, soulless. I called Ethan. He hesitated before answering, his voice low. "Claire. Can you come by?" "The patio lights, they're flickering again," I lied. A pause. Then quietly, "You sure you want me to?" "Yes." When he arrived, it was nearly sunset. The city sky glowed gold and crimson, shadows stretching across the lawn. We didn't speak at first. He checked the switch, adjusted a wire, and finally turned toward me. Lights are fine, he said, almost a whisper. I nodded. My heart was pounding. Then why am I here, he asked. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and in that look, every secret I'd buried rose to the surface. He stepped closer, slow, cautious, as though afraid of breaking something invisible. The distance between us shrank until I could feel his breath. And then, before either of us could stop it, we crossed that line. The kiss was desperate, years of silence and longing crashing into one impossible moment. Every ounce of guilt, loneliness, and desire combusted like oxygen meeting flame. When we finally broke apart, the world felt unsteady. I could hear the sound of my heartbeat echoing in the quiet. He whispered my name, once, softly, like it was sacred. And for that one night, I let myself believe it was. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the floor and the faint scent of cedar. Ethan was gone. A note lay on the counter. This can't happen again. I read it over and over, my chest tightening with confusion and fear. Because the truth was, I didn't know if I could stop. Daniel came home that evening, full of stories about his client dinner. He laughed, poured us wine, talked about summer plans. I nodded, smiled, pretended. But inside, my world had already shifted. I wasn't the same woman anymore. That night, when he reached for my hand across the table, something inside me ached. Not because I didn't love him, but because I'd broken something sacred between us, something I could never repair. A week passed. Then 2. I threw myself into daily routines, carpools, groceries, parent meetings, anything to silence the guilt. But it didn't fade. It sat in my chest like a second heartbeat. Then one evening, as I drove past the lakefront, I saw Ethan's truck parked by the pier. Without thinking, I pulled over. He was sitting on the hood, staring at the skyline, Chicago shimmering under a lavender dusk. I told myself not to come, I said quietly, walking up. He looked at me, eyes tired but still filled with that same dangerous warmth. I told myself not to answer, he replied. Neither of us moved for a moment. The air between us buzzed with everything unsaid. I tried to forget, I whispered. Did it work? I shook my head. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. This will destroy you, Claire. Maybe, I said. But it already has. The wind off the lake was cool, carrying the faint sound of distant traffic. He looked at me for a long time, then said, then we're already too far gone. He kissed me again, slower this time, heavier with knowing. And that was the moment I understood something frightening. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It was an unraveling. When I got home that night, Daniel was waiting up. He smiled, asked if I was okay. I lied, said I'd been visiting a friend. But as I walked past him, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Because that woman was living 2 lives, and both were about to collapse. The human heart has a cruel way of adapting, even to guilt. At first, it crushes you, it keeps you up at night, whispering what you've done. But over time, it dulls just enough for you to breathe again, until one small thing brings it roaring back to life. For weeks, I lived in that dull in-between, part of me numb, part of me terrified. I told myself what happened with Ethan was over. We had both agreed it couldn't continue. But secrets don't fade, they fester. They change how you walk, how you speak, how you look at the people you love. Daniel started noticing the distance. You've been quiet lately, he said one night as we folded laundry in the living room. I'm just tired, I lied. He smiled faintly. You've been tired a lot lately. I didn't answer. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until he turned up the TV volume, pretending not to see what he already felt. Chicago in July is restless, hot winds, endless traffic, the sound of sirens blending with laughter from street corners. But for me, the city felt quieter than ever. Ethan and I hadn't spoken in nearly a month. He'd finished the project and moved on to another site. Still, his absence felt louder than his presence ever had. Every morning, I caught myself glancing at the driveway, half expecting his truck. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I saw his name flash on my phone. "Ethan, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing, "We shouldn't." His reply came fast, "I just need to see you once. Please." I should have deleted the message. But that night, when Daniel said he had another late meeting, I found myself driving to the edge of the city, to a quiet parking lot behind an unfinished building. He was there, leaning against his truck, hands in his pockets, eyes tired. "Why did you come?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I said truthfully. We stood in silence, the kind that feels like a confession. "I tried to stay away," he said, stepping closer. "But every time I close my eyes, I see you." The honesty in his voice broke something inside me. I should have turned around, but I didn't. Because deep down, I felt the same. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, slow, trembling, and whispered, "This isn't right." "I know," I breathed. "But it doesn't feel wrong when I'm with you." And just like that, we were back where we started, on the edge of something we both knew could destroy us. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments, short, desperate meetings that lived somewhere between love and madness. A quiet coffee shop on the west side. A deserted stretch of Lakeshore Drive where no one would recognize us. Each time, I promised myself it would be the last. Each time, I broke that promise. I became an expert at hiding. Deleting messages, timing calls, memorizing lies. I learned to smile through guilt, to kiss my husband goodnight while my heart beat for another man. But the human soul wasn't built for double lives. And soon, the cracks began to show. It started with a message. One morning, Daniel handed me my phone. "Your screen lit up," he said casually. Didn't want to ignore it. The message preview burned into my brain. "Ethan, last night was everything." My heart stopped. Daniel didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered, curious, faintly puzzled. "You okay?" "Yes," I stammered. It's from a friend." He nodded slowly, then placed the phone on the counter. "All right." But something in his tone shifted that day. From then on, Daniel started asking more questions. Who I was texting. Where I'd been. Why I looked distracted. I tried to act natural, but guilt makes even truth sound suspicious. And yet, despite the fear of being caught, I couldn't stop. I'd tell myself each time was the last, but then Ethan would call, and the cycle would begin again. One night, as we sat in his truck overlooking the city lights, he turned to me and said, "We can't keep doing this, Claire. You have too much to lose." "So do you," I whispered. He smiled sadly. "Not like you." I didn't want to hear the truth in his words. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I was risking a marriage, a family, a life I'd built from the ground up. But love, or whatever it was we had, made me reckless. It blinded me to everything else. Then came the night everything changed. Daniel came home earlier than usual. The kids were already asleep. I was in the kitchen cleaning up when I heard him call my name. "Claire." His voice was quiet, steady. But something about it made my stomach drop. He was standing by the counter, holding my phone. "I needed to check the time," he said. And then I saw this. He turned the screen toward me. A photo, me and Ethan, laughing at the pier, my hand resting on his arm. The blood drained from my face. "Daniel," I started, but he raised a hand. "How long?" His tone was eerily calm. I opened my mouth, but no words came. "How long?" he repeated, louder this time. Tears burned my eyes. "A few months." He stared at me for a long time, breathing hard, his jaw clenched. Then he said quietly, "I gave you everything. Everything, Claire." And for the first time since it began, I realized just how much I'd broken, not only my marriage, but the man who had once trusted me with his soul. He didn't shout. He didn't throw anything. He just walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind him was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. That night, I sat alone on the floor, staring at the shadows on the wall. The house felt different now, colder, hollow. Every corner whispered what I'd lost. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old messages from Ethan, then deleted them all, one by one. It didn't make me feel clean. It just made me feel empty. Because guilt doesn't go away when the truth comes out, it just changes shape. When the truth finally came out, I thought the hardest part would be losing Daniel. I was wrong. The hardest part was waking up every morning and realizing the person I'd been, the wife, the mother, the woman who believed she was good, was gone. The days after he left blurred together. I remember the smell of rain and detergent, the soft murmur of my children asking when Daddy would come home, the cold space on his side of the bed. He didn't shout, he didn't curse me, Daniel just disappeared into silence. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any word could. Chicago's summer light felt cruel, bright, unforgiving. I spent hours sitting by the window, watching the city move on without me. Mothers pushing strollers, couples laughing over coffee, strangers living lives unbroken. My phone stayed dark for days, until finally, Ethan's name appeared. "Ethan," I heard. "Are you okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before answering, "No." He came that evening. When I opened the door, he looked older, like guilt had added years to his face. He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Daniel knows," I said quietly. He nodded. I figured. He called me. The words cut through me. He what? He wanted to know if I'd tell him the truth. I didn't deny it. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "You told him?" I couldn't lie, Claire. He deserved the truth. I sank into the couch, head in my hands. "Then that's it. It's over." He sat across from me, voice soft. "Maybe it's time it should be." His words stung, but part of me knew he was right. Whatever this was, whatever we thought it was, had turned poisonous. Still, I whispered, "Don't leave." "I have to," he said. "Before I ruin what's left of your life." When he walked out that night, he didn't look back. And with him went the last piece of the lie I'd built my world around. The weeks that followed felt like punishment written in slow motion. Daniel moved into a hotel downtown. He refused to answer my calls, though he kept up with the children, visiting them every weekend. Watching him smile at them, his face softening only for them, broke something in me every time. Our house became a museum of memories. The scent of his cologne lingered on his jacket in the hallway, his coffee mug stayed where he left it. I tried to erase him, but love leaves fingerprints you can't wash off. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I found myself driving aimlessly through the city. The skyline glittered like a cruel reminder of everything still alive. I ended up near the lake, where Ethan and I once sat talking about dreams. The air was cold now. The bench was empty. I sat there for hours, listening to the water hit the rocks, trying to understand how something that felt so alive could end so quietly. Days turned into weeks. Then, one morning, I got an email from Daniel's lawyer, divorce proceedings. The subject line read petition for dissolution of marriage. I stared at it until my vision blurred. It didn't surprise me, I'd been waiting for it. But seeing it written, official, final, felt like a knife sliding under my ribs. Later that afternoon, Daniel came by to discuss logistics. It was the first time we'd been in the same room since the night he found out. He looked thinner, his face pale but composed. He didn't sit. "I'll handle the house," he said evenly. "You can keep it for the kids." I nodded, my throat dry. "Thank you." He hesitated, glancing toward the living room where our wedding photo still hung. "Why him, Claire?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "How do you explain the kind of loneliness that lives even in love?" "I don't know," I whispered. I was empty. He made me feel seen. Daniel looked at me for a long moment, eyes full of a pain so deep it was almost gentle. "You could have told me you were lonely," he said quietly. "I would have listened." Then he turned and walked out again. That was the last real conversation we ever had. After that day, something in me changed. The panic was gone. The guilt, too, had shifted, no longer sharp, but heavy, constant. I began to live in slow motion, doing everything by habit: breakfast, school drop-offs, bills, bedtime stories. One night, my daughter asked, "Mom, are you and Daddy mad at each other?" I smiled through tears. "No, sweetheart. Just learning to be apart." But even she knew that wasn't the truth. Children always know. A few weeks later, I ran into Ethan at a grocery store downtown. He looked different, tired, unshaven, lost. Our eyes met across the aisle, and for a moment, everything came flooding back: the heat, the laughter, the danger. He walked over slowly. "How are you?" "I'm surviving," I said. He nodded. "I left the firm. Moving to Denver." I swallowed. "That's good." He smiled faintly. "For both of us." There was a pause. Then softly, "Claire, I never meant for any of this to happen." "I know," I said. "Neither did I." He hesitated, then reached out and brushed my hand one last time. "Take care of yourself." And then he was gone. Just like that. That night, as rain hit the windows, I sat on the floor of my bedroom and looked around at what was left of my life. The photos, the empty closet space, the silence, it all told the same story. I had chased something wild, something beautiful, something forbidden. And in return, it had taken everything. For the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not for Daniel. Not for Ethan. But for the woman I used to be before I lost myself in the hunger to feel alive. Because that's the cruelest part of betrayal: it doesn't just break the people you love. It breaks you, too. The night I decided to tell the truth wasn't planned. It wasn't brave. It was just time. Time to stop hiding behind the woman I used to be. Time to look my reflection in the eye and stop pretending that the pieces of me still fit. I remember standing in front of my mirror that night, barefoot, makeup smudged, hair undone. Chicago city lights filtered through the blinds, streaking across the floor like lines of confession. I turned on my camera. Not to record a message for anyone specific, but to tell myself the truth for the first time. "If you're listening," I began softly, my voice trembling, "then maybe my story can save someone else from the silence that almost drowned me." It's been 8 months since Daniel left. The divorce is final now. The house feels emptier than I ever imagined. The laughter of my children fills the air, but at night, when they sleep, the walls remember what I did. People think infidelity begins with lust. But it doesn't. It begins with a void. It begins with the slow fade of connection, when goodnight kisses turn into nods, when laughter becomes noise, when love turns quiet. And then, someone appears. Someone who listens. Someone who looks at you the way your husband hasn't in years. That's where the seed is planted. Not in desire, but in hunger. Ethan didn't seduce me. I seduced my own loneliness. Every smile he gave me was a mirror reflecting what I missed about myself, my youth, my boldness, my worth. And when I gave in, I told myself it was just once. Just one night to feel alive. But sin doesn't stop where you tell it to. It keeps coming back for more, until you can't tell where pleasure ends and destruction begins. The night Daniel found out, I saw the man who once promised me forever look at me like a stranger. And I realized I hadn't just cheated on him. I'd cheated on the life we built. The late nights in our first apartment. The hospital hours when our son was sick. The mornings when we held each other before work. All of that, gone, in the space between temptation and choice. Chicago winters are cruel, but that year, they felt personal. Every gust of wind sounded like judgment. Every frozen street corner whispered my failure. There were days I wished he would yell at me, break something, anything, because silence felt like death stretched over weeks. But Daniel never gave me that release. He just left, taking the air with him. For months, I tried to rewrite what happened in my head. I told myself I wasn't evil, just human. I told myself love can fade, people can change. But the truth is simpler, and far uglier. I wanted to be desired more than I wanted to be honest. Tonight, as I record this, I can still smell his cologne in the closet. I can still see Ethan's smile in my dreams. But I've stopped chasing ghosts. Forgiveness isn't something Daniel owes me. It's something I have to earn every single day. I've started therapy. I joined a support group for women who lost their marriages to choices they can't undo. Some of them cry, some don't. But all of us share the same ache, the haunting awareness that love, once betrayed, never returns the same way. Last week, Daniel dropped the kids off and waited at the door. For the first time in months, he smiled. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't warmth. But it was peace. "Claire," he said quietly, "I hope you find what you were looking for." I wanted to tell him I already had, that what I was looking for wasn't in Ethan's arms or in the thrill of being wanted. It was in this, the stillness after the storm, where truth hurts but heals. But I couldn't say it. So I just nodded. He turned away, and I realized something powerful: love doesn't always end with hate. Sometimes it ends with acceptance. If you're still here, listening to me, maybe you're standing on the same edge I once stood on. Maybe you feel unseen, forgotten, lonely in a marriage that used to make you feel alive. Listen to me, don't cross that line. Don't confuse attention with affection. Don't mistake passion for peace. Because once you step into that shadow, nothing looks the same again, not even the sunlight. I lost my family chasing a reflection of myself I thought I'd lost. But here's the truth. You don't find yourself in someone else's arms. You find yourself when you stop running from your pain. She pauses. Her voice breaks slightly. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because someone out there needs to know that regret can whisper louder than desire. If this story reaches even one person before they make the same mistake, then maybe my scars will mean something. Camera pans slowly toward the window, the Chicago skyline glows faintly under the moonlight. Her voice becomes soft, distant, reflective. Love isn't a feeling. It's a choice. And so is betrayal. Tonight, I choose to live with the truth. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward. If Claire's story moved you, if her confession made your heart ache or your eyes tear up, please like, share, and comment below. Tell us what part of her story touched you most. And if you want to hear more real, soul-stirring confessions like this, stay tuned. More stories of love, loss, and redemption are coming.